Welcome back to Wake Up with Cheddar. Roughly a year into a pandemic that's completely upended our lives, we are getting closer to the finish line with two potential vaccine candidates now waiting for FDA approval. The question remains, though, who's going to get priority? And joining us now is Dr. Dan Fagbuyi, emergency physician and Obama administration public health and biodefense appointee. Great to have you on this morning. A group of CDC advisors met Tuesday deciding who's going to be first in line to get this potential vaccine. What do we know?
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for having me. Well, what we know is that they're going to actually be giving it to healthcare workers, prioritizing healthcare workers and long-term healthcare facility residents. So that would be the elderly population who have been at the highest risk. By the way, this population has accounted for 40% of the COVID-19 cases. So that's a huge thing.
So do you agree with this decision, at least on who's getting the initial vaccine?
Most definitely. I actually tweeted about this about 3 months ago in September about what I thought would be priority, and it seems like it's congruent with that recommendation. So that's a good thing. And many other academicians and physicians have actually opined on the same thing and have come up with the same kind of recommendation.
So who do you think should be next after those two groups?
Very good question. So I think it would be our public health and safety folks. So that would be your firefighters, your police officers, your grocery store clerks, and in addition to people who have underlying medical conditions. I would throw the race issue in there too. I think we have to prioritize the populations that have been significantly affected disproportionately, which will be the Black Latinx population.
I also knew this morning the UK is the first country, the first Western country to approve that Pfizer vaccine. It's going to start to get rolled out potentially next week. I know the White House has questioned why the U.S. hasn't approved it yet. Do you know what the holdup is here? I know we've been moving at a record pace, but do you know why the U.S. hasn't approved it yet and what a timeline might look like?
Don't have any visibility on the timeline, but I know that they're reviewing that data, and we want to make sure they're reviewing the data appropriately and they give the best recommendations. They're lifelong scientists and experts who have been doing this work for years, and their dedication has been consistent. So they're going to take their time to do what they need to do, and we want them to get it right. We can't have any missteps. We've had a lot of other missteps. This is the time for us to make sure we make right on that with the American people.
Do you predict, when do you predict that most Americans will be able to get the vaccine? And do you have any concerns about the logistics of distributing it?
Well, I definitely do have concerns about the logistics. I also have opined on this several times in the months prior. It's very challenging. It's not that it's not doable. It is very feasible, but there are a lot of things that have to go right. It's an orchestration that has to be really coordinated to the nth degree. I even alluded to the fact that people need to actually probably get their popcorn out and actually watch what's going to happen, because it's not something light to tackle. And when most people will actually probably receive this vaccine will probably be late summer, and that's me being optimistic about that. So the regular folks or average folks, before you get it in your arm, it's probably summer.
So late summer would be like July or August, because there was thinking potentially the end of Q2, which would be a little bit earlier than that. From what you've seen so far of the health data, do you as a doctor just have any concern about side effects or the impact of these vaccines, or do you feel that they're pretty safe?
So I feel vaccines are safe. I think what we are looking forward to is seeing the data real time. So I think the job of the alphabet soup agencies that have been involved in this and the independent bodies, which are great and objectivists that will actually give some insight into what's going on. Transparency is a big deal. And especially at this crucial time, we need to have that information. So data needs to be published. Actually, we need to look at the study. I've said that myself. I would recommend that, but I do need to see the data. so that I can be confident in what I'm telling to my patients when I see them and look into their eyes, to when I see family members and they ask me these questions, so I can feel comfortable discussing that. You asked another question, which was with regards to adverse effects, side effects. I would flip it around. There are expected responses that you're actually supposed to see when you get the vaccine. So I wouldn't necessarily call it an adverse effect. It kind of sounds horrible. Adverse effects. That freaked me out too. But it is an issue of safety, and I think you should expect a certain response, and the response will be redness, swelling at the site. Some people may feel some body aches. Some people may even have flu-like symptoms, but it'll probably last a day or two. And it's important because we want people to take these vaccines, and also they may have to come for a second shot in certain vaccines. So that's a key thing that we need to talk about.
It's a really good way to frame it. Obviously, marketing is super important because people need to feel comfortable getting the vaccines. At this point, there have been no tests on kids, right? Do you know where things stand with the youngest people? I think it would be anyone under 12 has not been tested yet. Why is that? And is there any sort of timeline in terms of when kids could potentially get this vaccine?
Oh, that's a big question, actually. So it's not an issue of testing; it's an issue of have they been studied in children. Let me give you just some history on that. With regards to kids, kids have been left behind on a lot of things in the past. We've started to improve the Academy of Pediatrics. Several members of the Disaster Advisory Council, which I also served on at one point in time, have pushed for this with Congress. We've actually lobbied, I've testified, and several of my colleagues have, to prioritize children so we don't leave them behind. With regards to this vaccine, yes, in the studies, in the clinical trials, there have not been enough kids involved in the studies. And I think the lowest age was 12, as you mentioned. So kids under 12 haven't been prioritized. They are looking at it, and the American public and the American Academy of Pediatrics and several other advocates for children will make sure that is done, and we'll keep beating the table on that issue. However, you have to kind of make sure we know the appropriate signals. We still have to get the data from this adult set of studies that we've received. So when we know those signals, I think it is appropriate to start to involve kids in that study.
All right. Is there a reason that they're not included, though? Is it just that is there a feeling like they could have adverse reactions potentially, or is it just that this is the way that it goes?
So the way it usually goes is that you usually start. So the history. That's why I was trying to mention the history part is that these vaccines typically the 18 to 55 under 60-year-olds are the typical population that are usually involved in these studies. It's kind of like the military age group. That's our history from time immemorial, especially when a product's going to come onto market. So the other outside studies or the studies that would follow in maybe the real world or phase 4, where we're actually getting to see any other signals, then they start to enroll some of the younger kids, unless there's something other extreme. So it does take a time, but some have advocated that the time is now to start looking at that. And I think it's reasonable to start looking at it with regards to kids.
All right, great insight. I guess we're almost there, a light at the end of the tunnel, finally. Dr. Daniel Fagbuyi, Obama administration public health biodefense appointee and emergency physician. Great to have you on.